Pandora Syndrome. Written by April Walleen. Read by April Walleen. Directed and recorded by Andreas Gallego. Chapter 2. My 21st Birthday. How I Got Into This Mess, Part 1. The sound of whirring grinders and people talking in the coffee shop above occasionally stirred me from my thoughts. It was irritating, picturing them flitting about and ordering their lattes in the free air, reminding me that all I was really doing was distracting myself with my little walk through the past. I forced myself to concentrate, to focus my thoughts. My 21st birthday was supposed to have been a happy day, the final step into womanhood in the eyes of the California law. I could never have known it would be an ushering into a world that I'd never known existed outside of movies and comic books. R.I.P. Pandora Todd, 1961 through 1982. So, it was Los Angeles where I went to die. August 13th, 1982 was the day I'd been, as the movies call it, born to darkness. It was the last time I saw daylight without pain and ate solid food for nourishment. The day I would meet a bullet with my name on it. Sad that I should die on the day I was born, but I chuckled in remembrance every time I passed a Forever 21. I always thought it was kind of fitting that some residents like to call L.A. the city of lost angels. If you lived there for more than a year, you'd see day in and day out the big fish from Little Pond Bumblefuck Nantucket come out to strike it rich as an actor, writer, producer, whatever. Those Los Angels worked as extras on movie sets, bartended, and waitressed, all in an effort to pay the exorbitant rent on their cramped no-bedroom apartments. Me, I just didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I may have been lost, but I was definitely no angel, and I was no big fish in my little pond. I moved into the little duplex in North Hollywood. Surprisingly, Jack and I got along pretty well as roommates. In fact, he quickly became one of my favorite gaming buddies. I'd only been there a couple weeks, but he tried to help me figure out what kind of job I should get. Cashier was definitely out, but maybe I could try my hand at bartending. I mean, how hard could slinging beers really be? Of course, I'd have to wait until my birthday to start applying, but I felt positive I'd find placement quickly. When the anniversary of my birth finally came, Rosetta was darling enough to drive up from San Diego for the celebration. She didn't like that I'd moved away, but she hadn't tried to stop me either. I think she could see that I needed to get away, at least for a little while. I was just glad the stapler incident hadn't freaked her out too much. So, like the lame little sister that I was, I had my brother take my friend and I club hopping. Jack invited a couple of his buddies along to make our venture a little less sad. So that night, as a responsible 21-year-old adult, I made the responsible adult decision to get as drunk as possible. Rosetta helped me dress up. She had always been more fashionable than me. Though, if I were truly honest with myself about the outfit she'd stuck me in, I couldn't have looked more like club trash vampire bait if I'd tried. "Stop your fussing," Rosetta scolded, swatting my hand away from the dangly earrings she'd put on me. "That's my favorite set. If you ruin them, you'll have hell to pay." "Duly noted," I muttered, looking myself over in the closet mirror. Glancing at Rosetta's reflection, I noticed that her thick brown hair wasn't nearly as teased as mine, and her dress wasn't nearly as short, or sparkly. It seemed that she was aiming to turn me into some high-fashion doll. I wasn't sure I liked it. The tight purple mini dress she'd poured me into expertly accentuated my curves. However, I seriously questioned the tight mesh fishnet top she'd paired with it. "So, what really happened at the funeral?" Rosetta asked as though it were a natural progression in the conversation. Her eyes were cast down, and I knew she'd been talking to my mother, just when I thought I was in the clear. "What do you mean?" I asked, feigning ignorance. No such luck. "Your mom said you passed out or something," she replied, narrowing her eyes at me. "Or something," I grumbled. "What happened?" she asked pointedly, turning me around so that I couldn't avoid the intensity of her light brown eyes. The Rosetta Inquisition was here, and it wouldn't go away until I talked. "Look, it's no big deal. I just had some momentary break in sanity." "You seem to be having those a lot, Miss Stapler Hands." "I'm fine now," I insisted, and tugged the tight, sheer black pantyhose she'd put me in. Rosetta was a bit shorter than I was, so her clothes didn't fit me quite right. "What happened?" she pressed me. I rolled my eyes. You wouldn't believe me if I told you. Try me. I looked at her straight in the eye. Fine, if that's the way she wanted it. Oh, I just had my grandmother wake up from her deathbed and tell me she loved me from beyond the grave. You're not funny, Pandora, Rosetta scolded me as she roughly teased a bit of my hair that apparently wasn't fluffy enough. Ow, not trying to be, I replied. Rosetta just scowled, clearly not believing me. I might have a problem with death, but you're not getting to me, Pandora Todd, she chided. I wanted to argue with her, as I often did when we talked about, anything. She was on the high school debate team and loved riling me up. Jack popped his head in. You two losers gonna join in the festivities? He called, shaking a bottle of margarita mix at us. We hadn't even made it out of the house before I'd claimed the first of my 3 sheets to the wind. Rosetta had brought up a bottle from her grandfather's tequila collection, and the thing was half gone by the time we got our little party on the road. This was before DUI enforcements were a real threat, so we didn't think twice about taking the car down to the Sunset Strip after margaritas and a few tequila shots. I enjoyed the lights of the Strip as we rolled down the boulevard in Jack's oh-so-fashionable second-hand station wagon. It was Jack, Rosetta, Jack's quiet friend who I kept forgetting about, and I, on our way to party like it was our last night on Earth. Jack was pumping Bowie songs on the tape deck, and I sang along, off-key, at the top of my lungs. Once we made it to the first club, I felt less awkward about how I was dressed. It was the summer of 1982, and it looked like a George Michael video had exploded. It was full of big hair, white blazers, and rhinestones for days. So with that, we began our whirlwind pub tour. We hit the Cat Club, the Rainbow Room, the Roxy. Yes, we were on a pub crawl of epic proportions. Unfortunately, none of us knew just how epic it would turn out to be. Finally, once I was deep into a happily drunken state, my brother brought Rosetta and I to the jewel of the Strip, the infamous Viper Room. Hot spot of the drunk and famous. Then it was called the Central, I think, but I like the Viper Room better. Pulling into the back lot of the club, I had the vain hope that I might see some celebs. But honestly, with the amount of alcohol in my system, David Hasselhoff could have been standing next to me, and I wouldn't have noticed. When I arrived outside the double doors of the club, I found myself disappointed. Famous bands played there. It was a Hollywood monument. But all I saw was a simple black exterior that wrapped around a corner liquor store with a poor white marquee announcing its headliners. This is it? I slurred, looking up at the meager exterior. My brother laughed, knowing how drunk I was, but to this day I still have the same opinion. It's a small club. The whole place was done out in black. One long bar with red lights beneath its ledge ran the length of the far wall. A rock band played on a small corner stage, and bar patrons jumped about to the beat. I couldn't figure out how all the bands, especially hair bands, could fit on the stage, let alone headbang like angst-ridden rock gods. The club-goers were already packed in like sardines with big hair, and there couldn't be more than 50 people. God forbid anyone get overly enthusiastic and start a mosh pit. People would be trampled to death. Jack found another friend at the bar, some guy named Jim, leaving Rosetta and I to our own devices. We hovered at the back of the bar, surveying the scene. The first thing I noticed was that you couldn't throw a rock without hitting a guy in eyeliner. I cringed as a painfully skinny punk rocker walked by me, his eyelids drenched in spiky mascara. Rosetta stood next to me, watching the crowd. "What about that guy?" Rosetta asked, pointing out a buffed-out dude with long blonde hair and a muscle shirt. "Yuck, no way," I groaned. This was a little game we'd been playing for the last couple clubs. She would point out guys, and I would point out why I wouldn't go near them. Honestly, I'm not sure why I was being so picky. I guess I just wasn't in the mood to be slobbered on by some Neanderthal. Case in point, the guy Rosetta had pointed out was now smarmily attempting to paw at some chick. "Why not?" Rosetta sighed. "Doesn't measure up to my list," I nodded at her. I'd never really thought of having a list before. You know, that imaginary list of things it would take for someone to be your perfect guy? Tonight, mine was real, and it was a mile long. What the hell? It was my birthday, and I was drunk. Why couldn't I be picky? "Oh, come on, Dora," Rosetta groaned at me. "You're never going to find a guy that measures up. Just go talk to someone. Anyone." "No guys in makeup," I told her firmly, as she attempted to point out another sparkly, watered-down drag queen. I didn't think it was such an unreasonable demand. I know it's a bit shallow, but I just couldn't stomach the idea of kissing a guy wearing more lipstick than me. I think all the pretty boys look kind of cute, Rosetta smirked. Our taste in men had always differed. I had standards, as where Rosetta was susceptible to anything with a pulse. Not that she went with many guys seriously, she just loved going out and would do so with anyone she deemed fit. More power to her, it just wasn't my style. A guy should also have good conversational skills, I said, flipping my teased black hair out of my face. You'd have to actually talk to a guy to figure that one out, Rosetta countered. Not just sit here and judge. Besides, you're counting out all the hot meatheads, doing yourself a disservice there. Well, I can't help it if no one catches my eye. I don't think it's too much to hope for a guy to have good breath, be well-groomed, and a good kisser. I like blue eyes, etc. Snob, Rosetta laughed at me. Geez, Dora, it's a wonder you ever even lost your virginity. I'm upping the stakes in this game. Oh? I asked her, raising a brow. I dare you to go to the bar and have a guy buy you a drink. No, I replied flatly. Chicken, Rosetta scowled. Then she began to pout. Come on, just do it so I can go get my dance on with one of the pretties out there. Just tell them it's your birthday. No self-respecting guy would let a girl go drinkless on her birthday. And what if I can't get anyone to buy me a drink? I challenged. Then I'll buy you a month's supply of red vines. My eyes lit up. You're on, I told her and quickly turned towards the bar. Red vines were my kryptonite, and she knew it. Good, now go and report back to me as soon as you get that drink. I nodded in mock compliance. Little did she know I would give it one shot and then just buy myself a drink. Satisfied with this devious little plan of mine, I waded my way through the crowd to the overly packed bar while musing drunkenly about red twisty candy. I leaned on the padded ledge of the bar, admiring the neon lights under its ledge. The bar was oddly sticky, but I forced myself not to think about that. Impatiently, I waited for the bartender to acknowledge me so I could order a drink I didn't need. I waved, trying to get his attention. However, try as I might, the bartender ignored me. I surveyed the guys at the bar waiting to order drinks. Nothing but big hair and lip gloss. Happily, none of them noticed me. Those red vines were as good as mine. Still waiting for a bartender to acknowledge my presence, I took the opportunity to look around for Jack. It took me a few, but eventually I spotted him. He was deep in conversation with a blonde woman sporting a low-cut dress. I searched for Rosetta and just barely made out her fluffy brown ponytail as she headed for the bathroom. Right after I got my drink, I'd head there to give her the bad news about all the candy she owed me. In preparation, I pulled what was left of my cash out of my bra. The dress was useless in the pocket department. As I stood there, I began to feel a little wobbly, and a nice wave of euphoria came over me. I guess the drinks were finally catching up. I felt loose and light then. I was ready to dance, ready to party, ready to damn near crawl on the bar top and flash the bartender if he'd only get me another drink. I was pretty sure I wasn't going to flash anybody, but as I considered it, a now familiar sensation flooded my limbs. My back straightened in alarm, and sure enough, I heard the whispering voices of warning in my ears. Beware, they seemed to say. Oh no, not now. I willed myself to ignore them and have a nice, normal evening. Focusing on the thrumming music, I tapped my foot in time, letting it take me over until the voices became nothing more than background noise. It felt wrong not to listen to them, and it was exhausting to dampen them, but I'd managed. May I be of some assistance? A smooth voice suddenly breezed by my ear, and an involuntary shiver ran down my spine. How had someone slid up to me without my notice? It was then I realized that might have been what my sudden weird feeling was about. It had sounded as though his lips were right next to my ear, but when I turned, the owner of the deep voice was merely lounging against the bar next to me. I stood stunned as I looked up into stormy blue eyes, waiting for my mind to catch up. The man was startlingly handsome, and at first glance hit every bullet on my imaginary list. No makeup, no teased hair, and no sparkly accessories. Maybe I was just drunk, but to me, he was perfection incarnate. I blushed so hard that my face felt like it was on fire. I did not mean to frighten you, he said with a dazzling smirk. His voice was low, soothing, and easily cut through the noise of the bar. You didn't scare me, I replied stubbornly, having somehow broken the spell of dumbfounded admiration that had momentarily snared me. He raised a brow in disbelief. I tried to look cool, but I was too wobbly at the moment to pull that off. Earlier, I'd felt like Wonder Woman. Nothing could get me down. Now I felt oddly vulnerable and painfully aware of the ankle I'd twisted on Selma Street, a victim of the tall shoes Rosetta had made me wear that night. "Nasty fall?" he asked, glancing at my favored leg. "Just tripped earlier," I replied nonchalantly. "No big deal. I'm more annoyed with the bartenders. It's my birthday and all I want is a drink." I rolled my eyes, trying to hide how flustered I was by his presence. Didn't want to scare him away. "Happy birthday," he smiled. Somehow, I'd managed to blush even harder. "Thank you," I replied after another moment of admiration. The man's eyes were intense, so much so that some part of me was screaming to turn away. Just when I thought I might faint from his gaze, the two blue sapphires gunning me down shifted to the bartender. In that moment, I felt like I could suddenly breathe again. If I'd ever asked Santa for a man, he would be it. He stood 6 feet with short yet nicely styled rich brown hair. The contours of his face were wonderful, featuring a strong jaw, high cheekbones, and a nose that made arrowheads jealous. He was clearly older than me, but couldn't be much past 28. I silently thanked Rosetta for dressing me up. Though even in my glammed-out state, there was a definite contrast in our clothing. He wore designer jeans that hugged every curve of his muscular legs, and an expensive-looking medium-length pea coat. In a moment of mental indulgence, I couldn't help imagining what was underneath them. He smirked at me a moment, as if sensing my appraisal. I blushed all over again. "Allow me," the man offered with a sly smile. Then he waved a lazy hand at one of the lady bartenders, whose gaze immediately fell on him. The thin blonde rushed over and levered her pushed-up cleavage upon the bar for full appraisal. I stared in amazement. That was some kind of quick service. "What can I get you?" she asked in a chipper tone. "The lady would like a Long Island." Good guess, since I hadn't told him what I wanted. This man went up any higher in my esteem, I'd need a ladder to reach him. The bartender eyed me skeptically, then quickly looked back at him. "And for yourself?" she asked with a flirtatious smile. "Remy Martin. Neat," he replied, and she slithered away to make the drinks. Seconds later, the woman placed the beverages in front of us, winked at my new crush, and took off on her broom. Bitch. Looking down at my drink, I realized I'd never been so happy to lose a bet with Rosetta in my life. Goodbye red vines, hello man candy. I smiled, trying to give him my best flirtatious eye. Since I'd never really used that look before, I hoped it was working. "Thanks for the help," I told him. He watched me as I played with my straw, trying to think of some way to continue the conversation. He waited patiently. That was nice of him. Let's just say I wasn't used to having guys buy me drinks. I tried to think of something intelligent to say, but I was the mental equivalent of the Mojave Desert. I couldn't let myself panic. I had to stay cool. "Would you like to join me this evening?" he asked with an easy grin. Hell yeah, I did. I began to nod when I realized I'd forgotten something. Rosetta. I was supposed to report back. If I went with him, I might never make it back to her. Just then, I realized that a trip to the bathroom after her might not be such a bad idea. I'd had a lot to drink and not many pit stops. It was probably now or never. I should check on my friend first. Most of me was screaming to go with the guy, right now, but some part was afraid, like something was pushing me to leave his intoxicating presence. Then again, I always got nervous when things went too well. My mother liked to call it my Pandora syndrome. Much like the character of Greek legend, I was great at unintentionally sabotaging things, especially myself. He reached toward me a moment, hesitated, and then seemed to relax. "If you insist," he replied with a mixture of disappointment and, strangely, surprise. It took some enormous willpower on my part not to stay. He smirked at me and pointed to the back of the bar. "I need to go for a quick bite anyway. I will be back there when you are ready." I felt like such a hick listening to him talk. He pronounced everything so clearly, whereas I, even when not drunk, had the diction of a truck driver. "That would be great," I replied with more enthusiasm than I had intended. I laughed a little at my overeagerness. "I'll be back, I promise." As I turned away, a cool hand took mine. An electric shock of longing ran up my arm, down my spine, and made a cozy little home between my thighs. I flushed and looked back at him. "Before you go, may I have the pleasure of your name?" I closed my eyes, momentarily frustrated with myself. The guy had been nice enough to buy me a drink, and I hadn't even asked his name? How could I be so rude? "You may," I replied, trying to save some face. It's Dora. Dora, he repeated thoughtfully, keeping his piercing blue eyes on me. Is it short for something? I never liked giving my real name. Pandora, I replied with an abysmal sigh. As in the Grecian myth? He asked with a raised brow. Yes, I groaned. All of the world's misery right here in one cute little package. Care to take a peek? My eyes widened as I realized what I just said to this perfect stranger. Oh, dear God in heaven and all the saints, why had I just said that? Luckily, he just smiled at my brazenness and moved closer. My pulse hammered in excitement. I might take you up on that, he replied smoothly. He lifted my hand to his cool lips and kissed it softly, stirring that electric shock that had curled up in my core. I envied my hand then. Madly, I wanted nothing more than to trace the curve of his lips with my own. I pulled away before I could act on the impulse. My name is Romulus, he continued. It is a pleasure to meet you. With a name like that, I could only guess he was European, though I didn't detect an accent. I'll be back. Gotta go find my friend, I stammered ineloquently. God, I felt like a malfunctioning automation around this guy. I decided then I would use this little break from his overwhelming presence to get a grip on myself. As I headed toward the ladies' room, my mind was captivated by thoughts of Rome. What was his name again? Oh no, how could I have forgotten already? Remy? He had ordered a drink, a Remy Martin. I'd heard of it before, though I couldn't tell you what kind of drink it was. Maybe I could get away with calling him Remy? He might think it was cute. Or he might be offended. Oh, man. I waded my way through the restroom line in search of my best friend. I had to do my friend duty, let her know that she won the bet, and that I would be preoccupied with a certain tall, blue-eyed god for the remainder of the evening, provided I didn't go haywire in his presence and find a way to run him off again. Once I'd finally made it to the restroom, I walked through a haze of aerosol and perfume to where the bathroom stalls stood. It was a short trip. There were only 2 cubes, small ones. Rosetta, I called, but no answer came. I looked under the doors for her shoes. Nope. Of course she wouldn't be there. Luckily, one of the stalls was vacant, so at least it wasn't a total waste of a trip. I looked under the doors for her shoes. Nope. Of course she wouldn't be there. Luckily, one of the stalls was vacant, so at least it wasn't a total waste of a trip. I didn't think it possible, but the stall was actually smaller than it appeared on the outside, and, of course, the lock was broken. I went through the irritating bathroom routine of wiping off the toilet seat, carefully pulling down my underwear and pantyhose as to avoid ripping them, and then trying to sit on the wobbly toilet seat, all while keeping the stall door from creeping open on me. Men have it so easy. Once I went through the unbelievably more difficult process of putting myself back together, I emerged from the bathroom. Unfortunately, I caught my reflection in the mirror. The blush on one side of my cheek had faded away, the liner under my right eye was going rogue, and let's not get started with my hair. Man, I sure hope that Remy was into train wrecks because this one looked particularly tragic. I searched for tools to repair my face. No paper towels left. Quickly, I rubbed off the blush on one side to match the other, dabbed my eyeliner back into place, and ran my fingers through my hair, hoping against hope to give it more volume. I was unsuccessful, but at least it looked neater. I glanced up at the mirror one last time, told myself it could be worse, and headed back into the club. I only made it a couple steps out of the restroom when I heard someone shouting for me. "There you are," a familiar voice yelled at me over the din of music and chatter. "So?" Rosetta asked anxiously, making her way through the crowd. "Yeah, okay, you're right." I shook the half-empty drink that Remy had bought for me as proof of her winning our little bet. "You did it! See, I knew dressing you up like a sex pot would work. Which one is he?" I turned to point Remy out to Rosetta, but I didn't see him anywhere. Oh, I forgot, he went out for some food, but he'll be right back. "Well, good job finding a guy. I knew once you stopped pouting you'd find someone," Rosetta said, patting me on the back enthusiastically. "While you were off flirting, I found one of my own. So I'll see you back at Jack's later." "Wait, you're leaving?" "Well, as much as I'd love to watch you drool all over some guy, I have my own oats to sow." I frowned. I knew she was right. I would definitely be preoccupied with Remy, but it still felt weird that she was leaving me to hook up with some dude. "Well, maybe we can all hang out." "Dora, you'll be fine." Rosetta insisted, one foot already heading in the opposite direction. Maybe I was being a birthday brat, but part of me was feeling supremely ditched. Rosetta grinned ear to ear, hugged me, and then bounced off into the crowd without another word. I deflated a little. Perhaps I should have just gone off with Remy and forgotten all about my so-called friend. Oh well. I would see Remy soon enough. Maybe I could hang out with Jack in the meantime, provided he wasn't still holding up the back wall with the blonde I'd seen him with earlier. As I walked through the room full of drunken partygoers, I spotted my brother's friend who had driven with us. I couldn't remember his name, so I took a stab in the dark. "Hey, Ben," I called. He looked down at me. Have you seen my brother?" I asked. "It's Brian," he scowled indignantly. I winced. Should have called him Buddy or Guy or something equally friendly and vague. "Sorry, I'm a little drunk," I apologized. "I can see that," he replied. "What a bitch." "Where's Jack?" I asked tartly. Guy sighed, clearly annoyed by my presence. "He left with a little blonde piece about a half hour ago. Said for you and your friend to get a ride with Jim." I stood with my jaw agape. Was this really happening? My brother had left me to hook up with some sleazy bimbo and then given vague instructions for me to get a ride from his friend that had met us at the bar? I was outraged, to say the least. "What about you?" I asked. "How are you getting back?" "Cab," he replied, shrugging his shoulder. "I live in the valley. Took a bus to meet Jack." I stood staring at Guy indignantly, when thoughts of Remy flowed into my mind. Maybe he'd be gracious enough to give me a lift. I quickly shook that thought from my mind, forcing myself out of the weird lust-filled haze I'd suddenly found myself in. I wanted to join Remy, but not go home with the man. Rosetta liked pulling that party trick, but it definitely wasn't my style. I just wanted to get a few kisses and then give him my number. Thinking about all this, I began to feel sick, my drunkenness suddenly taking on a dizzy quality I didn't like. Guy rolled his eyes at me apathetically. Apparently my current state was interfering with his wallflowering good time. I took a deep breath, trying to compose myself, and looked out to the crowd. I'd only seen Jack's friend Jim briefly and couldn't remember what he looked like. "Which one is Jim? The one with the eye makeup?" I looked around. He might as well have said the one with the nose. "Thanks," I spat at him. "Yeah, thanks for nothing, no good friend of my evil birthday girl-ditching brother." No longer having a good time, I looked for the one with the eye makeup, but it was no use. I tried to deny the fact that I'd been left behind. Cell phones were still over a decade away from being in everybody's pocket, so getting separated from your party in a strange city was a really, really bad thing. I feebly made my way through the sea of makeup-drenched faces, looking for a vaguely familiar guy with eyeliner. Try as I might, I didn't see Jim, and I couldn't tell where the back of this loud, neon-lit hellhole was in order to find Remy. I'd thought this place so small when I'd got here. Now it felt like I'd been sucked into some endless void filled with red lipstick and spangle shirts. As I continued my fruitless search, I fought my drunken mind into submission, listing the bullet points of my situation. 1. My brother had abandoned me on my birthday in one of the most tightly packed clubs ever in order to get laid. 2. Rosetta had ditched me, also to get laid. 3. I'd met a stranger named Remy who had an insane effect on my lady parts, and I definitely wasn't getting laid if I didn't find him. Not that that's what I wanted. Was it? 4. I was surrounded by makeup-caked faces looking for a particular made-up face named Jim. And now number 5, possibly the most worrying of them all, the club was starting to spin around me. The music was thumping in a surreal soundtrack of guitars and bass that vibrated hypnotically in my chest. What time was it? I looked at the stupid swatch Rosetta had given me, tried to read it, and failed. It must have been late because the more I wandered, the more the crowd thinned. I tried to get a hold of myself. Had I had 5 Long Islands or 6? Who'd I come looking for? Something about Grandma was echoing in the back of my thoughts. A terrible feeling came over me then. I turned, and through the sea of bodies and cigarette smoke, I saw a dark figure watching me. Was it Remy? I squinted. No, the figure was smaller. I rubbed my eyes in disbelief, but when I opened them again, the figure was gone. Oh, great. I was hallucinating. Not good. I had to get out of there. The club had become a place of high-pitched laughter and pulsating lights. I took a deep breath and strode for the front door. Or was it the side door? I just headed for a door. Maybe if I was lucky, Remy would be outside. Even if he wasn't, I needed air. I flung open the side door of the Viper Room and stepped into the less oppressive atmosphere of Sunset Boulevard. The night air hit my face, and I took a deep breath, feeling as if I hadn't breathed in hours. It felt good, refreshing. I composed myself as best I could, having barely managed to descend the set of dark, rickety stairs leading out of the club without killing myself. Kudos to me. Just as I was reveling in the cool breeze, my heel caught a crack in the sidewalk, rolling my ankle harshly. I quickly righted myself, trying not to look as drunk as I felt. I continued on and somehow found myself near the back of the building. I bumped through a crowd of smokers, still no one I recognized. Of course, it would have been easier to search if the pavement would hold still. Stupid pavement. I worked my way towards the parking lot by holding on to news boxes and signposts. I was nearly there when one of them suddenly moved. I tumbled forward, barely managing to catch myself before hitting the ground. As I got to my feet, I realized that the street lamp I had been reaching for was in fact an angry anorexic blonde. "Watch it, Coos!" the blonde yelled at me. "Coos?" I laughed at her. "What does that even mean?" The girl just glared at me. "It means watch out, you drunk bitch." Ignoring the irate not-so-supermodel, I resumed my search for familiar faces. Why was everyone so unpleasant this evening? Well, everyone except Remy, who I had inadvertently stood up because I'd been drunk and directionally challenged. Blood rushed to my cheeks. Had I missed my opportunity for a ride, or a phone number, or even just a kiss goodnight? I kicked the sidewalk in frustration and nearly fell again as my knee and ankle throbbed in protest. Maybe I could catch a cab. I patted my non-existent pockets and quickly remembered that I'd spent all my birthday cash on Long Island's. My fateful moment in the Viper Room parking lot came shortly after the realization of my inability to get home. Looking back on it, if I'd been armed with the knowledge I have now, that vampires are real, that the dead can talk, and that wandering drunkenly into the parking lot would bring me right into the middle of it, would I have gone ahead anyway? Those memories, painful and fresh in my mind's eye, made my heart ache. I contemplated the drunken fury I'd felt after being left behind. My enjoyment of throwing Rosetta's borrowed accessories across the parking lot like little glittering UFOs. Remy's sweet voice as it penetrated the inebriated fog shrouding me. His cool blue eyes boring into mine before his warm lips descended upon my own. Ardent bliss. Then, all too soon, there'd been the realization that we weren't alone, and the warning ring of low voices in my mind telling me to run. There'd come a loud crack and the searing pain of a gunshot to the chest. To this day, the memory of that feeling still chilled me to the bone. Everything was black and I felt like I was floating. My chest didn't hurt anymore. In fact, nothing hurt. I was oddly numb. There were no sounds, no sights. What the hell was happening? I'd been shot, hadn't I? A stark possibility hit me then. Had I died? Was I ascending to heaven? I wasn't particularly religious, but I was pretty sure there should be some bright lights, or angels, or something heavenly looking. Was I descending to hell? I couldn't think of why I would go to hell. I'd be pissed off if God decided that I should burn forever in eternal damnation for stapling a perverted coworker's head, or having sex before I was married, or not attending church, or taking the Lord's name in vain, or conversing with the dead at a funeral, or... God damn it, I was going to hell. I couldn't feel any heat, though, let alone fire. Was I in purgatory? If purgatory was just floating alone with my thoughts, I could probably stand it for a little while, but eventually I'd run out of things to talk to myself about. That was a depressing possibility. I felt my body suddenly shift then, and my eyes flew open in shock. I could barely make out a dim figure above me. When my sight finally adjusted, I found Remy hovering over me. How sweet. He'd stayed to watch me die. I'd kind of hoped that when I died my family might be around. Oh well, at least the last face I would see was a pretty one. I looked down and saw the bloody mess my body had become. I'm no medical expert, but cause of death was definitely a bullet to the chest. Strangely enough, my thoughts turned to Rosetta's stuff. Between losing her jewelry in a drunken fury, ruining her dress with a bullet hole, and dying, she would not be happy with me. Well, screw her anyway. If she hadn't left, I might not be in this mess. Or she could have been shot too. Oh God. I tried not to focus on the gory details of my ripped skin, shattered bones, torn organs, massive bleeding, or that drowning feeling. So much for not thinking about it. "Pandora," Remy called, pulling me from my gruesome thoughts. I opened my mouth to speak, and he obligingly lowered his ear to my mouth. With all my might, I sputtered out, "It's Dora." Remy looked down at me, trying and failing to hide a smile. It would have warmed my heart, had my heart not been growing colder by the moment. He tried to talk to me, but he just sounded like the adults in a Peanuts cartoon. You know, wah, wah, wah. Remy was trying to keep my attention. He seemed hurried, but surprisingly cool about my bleeding out and dying on him. I tried to listen. Then I realized that he was asking me something. Perhaps he wanted to know my last wishes on my deathbed? Or death asphalt parking lot, whatever. He snapped his fingers in front of me, and I focused, trying to figure out what he was asking. I wish I'd taken that JC course on lip reading. Then suddenly I knew what he was saying. "Do you accept me?" What the hell did that mean? My brows arched in confusion. I heard a soothing voice in my head then. It was different than the ones I'd heard before. Less whispery and more solid. "It's your choice," the voice seemed to say. And in that moment, somehow, I knew that I was being offered life. A way out of this one-way ticket to push up daisies. I could bleed here on the pavement until I went to whatever place God had in store for me, or I could fight for another path. As the cold of imminent death seeped into me, a sudden rage began to kindle in my bones. I wanted to see my killer's face, to make them pay, and I would if I accepted what was being offered. "Yes," I said with as much conviction as I could muster through the wet gurgling emanating from my chest. Note to self, don't try to speak with a punctured lung. Just then, Remy disappeared and my whole body went stiff. Then it relaxed, and went stiff again. What was happening? Every muscle in my body seemed to tense and relax over and over. It was weird, but it distracted me from the white-hot pain in my chest. Then, fluid filled my mouth. Water? No, it was thicker than that. It tasted metallic. Sweet. Was I bleeding out of my mouth? How much blood could you swallow before you got sick? Dying was weird. Then again, I had nothing to compare it to, so I guess it would seem odd. Then, to my embarrassment, there was a strange surge of pleasure and an odd euphoria. I felt good, almost excited even. Insane considering the situation. Maybe dying feels good? Perhaps that's why the French called orgasms the little death. Except this was the big death. Well, they were pretty big spasms, ones that wrenched my body. Unfortunately, the spasms were now becoming a little too intense. Then they started to hurt. A lot. Never mind what I'd been saying about dying feeling good. Dying sucked. Blinding pain shot through me, and I began to thrash about so hard it was a wonder I didn't break a bone or three. Stars and lightning strikes clouded my vision. I tensed, trying to push the pain away, but it was no use. I screamed, and a strong hand covered my mouth, but I just screamed all the more. I heard sirens then. Oh, thank God, the ambulance was here. I prayed they had morphine, and a ton of it. Maybe I wouldn't die on my birthday after all. Then I felt myself being lifted. Lights blurred around me, and cold air hit my skin like I'd suddenly been thrown into a wind tunnel. Within moments, everything went black. I awoke in total darkness and knew I was in that same dark void I'd been in during my blackout. It had the same chilled feeling and scent of freshly turned earth. Thankfully, this time my feet were beneath me. I was standing up, but that was as good a picture as my senses could paint for me. Shapes began to materialize in front of me. I froze, dumbfounded, as structures, rocky cliffs, and walls began to take form. One section at a time, they appeared in menacing designs, fashioned from the darkness itself. It was like a Gothic theme park being built before my eyes. Walt Disney, eat your heart out. A black sea churned below me, writhing with a ghastly green-blue fog that made it look as though it had a life of its own. Its black shore led up to large, dark gates, though what was beyond them I couldn't quite see. To the right of the large gate loomed a grim, rocky terrain littered with pools of liquid fire. Smoke rose from the pits into great plumes of ashen cloud that obscured the land beyond it. A light from a strangely bright area to my left suddenly lit up the sky like the aurora borealis, stinging my eyes. The lights appeared to be every color at once, and yet none at all. Shifting my gaze to my feet, I saw that I stood on an ebony stone surface. A bridge. The massive structure led across the writhing sea to a great black castle adorned with towering parapets. It looked like a medieval fortress. The building was so tall that it stretched up into the darkness beyond sight. I stared on in awe. It was then I noticed a pale figure at the great entrance, dressed in flowing black robes that writhed around him like a living thing. From across the expansive bridge, he stared at me, his eyes black like two dark voids. Somehow, I knew he wanted me to join him. Strangely enough, I wanted to go. Something was pulling me toward the man. I moved to take a step, to cross the bridge, but some invisible force held me back. The man's brow knit together, and he reached a pale hand towards me. I stretched my own hand out in return, but I was suddenly yanked backwards into the darkness.